You're listening to Community Heroes podcast featuring people sharing about their stories with their disabilities. And now for your hosts, Brandon and Pate. Welcome back to Community Heroes podcast. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the USA Paralympian road cyclist, Alica. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get into the sport of road cycling?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a pretty athletic family, the youngest of 5 kids, and we all rode bikes and cross-country skied and raced and bike raced, able-bodied. We did a lot of sports. And then I actually was an able-bodied bike racer as a teenager. And then I had an accident when I was 17. I fell from a tree 40 feet and broke my back and became paralyzed and in a wheelchair. So this was back in the late 80s, and hand cycles weren't really very prevalent back then. So it took some years before I got my first hand cycle. But when I did, it was like returning to the sport that I loved. And a few years later, some races started happening, and I jumped right on the bandwagon as soon as I possibly could.
Of course, after your accident, what was it like getting started into competing in sports?
Yeah, well, it was quite different from doing able-bodied sports as I had done before my accident. And like I said, there was a bit of a lag. Some years went by before I managed to get my first hand cycle. So, I think able-bodied people are privileged to have greater access to equipment. They can just go to a sports store and pick up what they need for, not cheap, but certainly well within affordability for most people. Whereas those of us who are doing an adaptive sport have to really search far and wide for the equipment that we need, which is very often quite costly. So those are some obstacles that kind of color one's experience in getting into whatever sport it is. But once you do, and you start connecting with other people doing it and going to events, whether those are competitions or just group events, doing the sport, it opens up a whole new world of connecting socially with peers, with others with disabilities or sport. And I've found that to be really rewarding. I've met a lot of really great people doing what I do. And I feel like there's a connection there that gets really strengthened by practicing the sport together and competing together.
What were some of the challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome those challenges to compete in hand cycling?
Well, for me, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the equipment issue again. I managed to get my very first hand cycle on my own, but this was back in the mid 90s, and the technology has really grown so much, and to get a really top of the line fast racing hand cycle costs upwards of $14,000. So it's quite hefty. And the biggest challenge for me was raising the money that I needed to get my first real competitive carbon fiber hand cycle. It took a whole community-wide effort and fundraising to do that. And then on top of that, there was the events, the races themselves take place all over the country. So none of them were really close to where I live in Vermont. So I needed to find the funding to get myself to races, whether that was in national championships or other events. So I had to really rely on my parents a lot in the beginning to help me out and just to get my foot in the door. Fortunately, because I worked really hard and kind of knew what was involved from my background in able-bodied sports, I knew what I had to do as far as training went. So I already had that kind of work ethic and in terms of endurance sports in me. I was able to relatively quickly get a spot on the national US Paralympic cycling team. And at that point, I was able to receive some direct athlete support, which is an athlete stipend, monthly stipend. And I had costs covered to international events in Europe. So it made it all more affordable for me and also gave me a bit of an income every month. So, you know, it was hard at first, like getting to that level, but once I was there, things got easier in terms of just being able to manage it all.
How was that feeling like when you did make the Team USA team to compete in hand cycling professionally?
It felt really great. Yeah, I first competed actually with the team back in 2000, 2001. And then I took like a 8 years or so period of time off because I had a child and I needed to raise her as a single mom. So I was really focused on that for a good chunk of time and throughout the early 2000s. And then I didn't even know if I'd get back into the sport, honestly. But then on a whim, I did a marathon and I did well, and I kind of caught the competitive bug again. So I decided to start training again in earnest. And really was only doing that seriously for about a year before I managed to get on the national team again. And that just was so satisfying because I felt, you know, like I was back where I wanted to be. And then the very next season is when I made my first Paralympic team, which was London 2012.
Of course, during that time when you took a hiatus, what was it like training and still competing, but just practicing the fundamentals of the sport?
Yeah, I actually didn't hardly rode my hand cycle at all during that hiatus. In that 8 years or so, I was really just so focused on raising my daughter. I had a part-time job. And, you know, I think I must have done some hand cycling here and there, but it wasn't anything related to training at all. And like I said, I wasn't even really thinking about getting back into the sport in a competitive way.
What was that feeling like when you did make the Paralympic team for the first time?
I was amazed. I was so happy. It was the very last spot that was open. Some of the other spots had already been filled and there was just one left. And I remember I went to this one selection event down in Georgia and I really had no idea. I knew there was a chance, but I didn't know how solid it was for me to make that one spot. And I just put everything I had into the one time trial event and found out later that day that it was fast enough to secure that last spot. So it was very thrilling.
What was your experience like competing in the World Championships?
I love the World Championships. They're They take place every year except for Paralympic year. And they're just as competitive as the Paralympic Games, only there's a lot less hype around it than the Games. The Games can be just a little bit crazy and stressful as far as all the publicity and hype and so the World Championships I really like because they're a little more low key, but still very prestigious. And to be able to win the rainbow jersey, the coveted UCI rainbow jersey, is a real badge of honor in the cycling world.
How's it like, obviously, competing in London in 2012?
That was my first Paralympic Games, and honestly, it was not a great experience. Like I said, I had only just made the national team the year before. I didn't really know the team that well. I didn't know how things were supposed to work. It was my very first Paralympic Games, and there was just a big learning curve. I didn't have, a lot of experience yet. So, I mean, it was exciting and everything, but my results weren't great. But nevertheless, I knew I could do better. So in a way, it was, just motivation to try harder for the next 3 years till the next games.
Of course, during that time from 2013 to 2015, what was some of the training that you did to prepare for your second run at the Paralympics?
Well, my training is it's a lot of riding on the roads around my house. And then I also have a stationary trainer in my garage that I use in the off season. So I live in Vermont. It's cold and snowy here in the winter. And I go out in my garage. I have a little space heater next to my trainer, and I do a lot of riding that way. I also go to the gym 1 to 3 times a week and do some strength training. So in total, I work out, probably about 6 days a week.
During that time that you were training for your second Paralympics, what were some of the things that you were trying to motivate yourself to accomplish during that time?
I think I was just really trying to stay consistent with my training. That was always the hardest thing for me, especially in the first few years of doing it, was orienting my daily life around my workout so that I would be sure to get it in and to have it be a good one day after day after day after day. The consistency really over time is really what yields results. So that was the thing I was trying to focus on. And I've always tried to sort of just stay in the present moment and in the day-to-day practice of training and not jump ahead too much in my mind about some big event that I want to do really well in, because that just kind of takes the focus away from where I am right now and what I'm doing right now to be ready for that event.
Of course, when you made the Paralympic team for the second time in 2020, what was that feeling like, getting to make that team and compete?
Yeah, 2020 was actually my third Paralympics, because there was London and then there was Rio in 2016. 2020 was a funny year. It was, the pandemic, and we actually had to, the games didn't actually even take place in 2020. They took place in 2021. We had to postpone it a whole year. So that was tough at first, because I felt really ready at the time to go in 2020, and to the thought of having to spend another year just anticipating it at first was really hard, but it ended up being kind of a good thing, because I did have a whole other year to kind of relax a little bit. I tweaked a few things in my training, changed some things around. started doing things a little bit differently. I had kind of that luxury of time to experiment a bit with my hand cycle setup and with my training. And I think that ultimately paid off. I was really in the best shape that I've ever been in going into Tokyo 2021.
Of course, in the 2016 Rio Games, what was that like receiving a silver medal? And then in the 2020 Games, what was that also like getting to receive a medal in that Games?
Yeah, I got a silver medal in the time trial in the Rio Games. And that felt amazing because, like I talked about earlier, my experience in London was not great. And I just really, really wanted to be on that podium. I almost didn't care what color medal it was. I just wanted to be up there and experience that. And so when I did win the silver, I was just so happy. It felt so fulfilling, like I had checked off the box on a major milestone in my career. So, and then later on in Tokyo in 2021, I'll never underappreciate a Paralympic medal of any color. However, I have to say I was a bit disappointed. I got a bronze medal in the road race, but the day before was the time trial, which is my best event. And I had been on my way to winning gold in that race when I was about 40 seconds ahead of the pack with just half a lap to go when my chain fell off and a staff person who was driving the follow car behind me jumped out and tried to help, but ended up losing the quick link, which is the little thing that holds the chain together. What ended up could have been a quick fix ended up being a 5-minute just sitting there by the side of the track. So that was incredibly, incredibly disappointing. So I had to do a quick change around, recover from that mentally and physically for the road race the next day. And I think it had just kind of knocked the wind out of my sails a bit. So, I ended up bronze in the road race, which is great. Like I said, I don't want to diminish that accomplishment at all, but I just, it was bittersweet. There was real disappointment in there as well.
What does it mean to you to be a Paralympian and represent road skiing?
It means a lot. It means the fulfillment of a dream that I had as a young girl, as a teenager, when I wanted to be a professional cyclist. And of course, I was able-bodied then, and my vision of that was different. But here I am, all these years later, being able to compete on the world stage with the best in the world in my sport. And it feels incredibly rewarding. There's a wonderful sense of camaraderie that I feel amongst all the other paracyclists that I compete with from other countries. And I just feel very privileged and honored to be able to be a part of that community.
How has obviously the sport of paracyclists gave you that platform to give back to the disability community and share your story with other people?
I feel very honored and privileged to be in a position to be able to kind of hold a light for others and to be an example of what's possible with a lot of hard work and time and effort and support. And I am always touched when I'll be, just downtown and somebody will approach me and tell me that I inspire them, or somebody at a race, afterwards will come up to me and, just in one way or another want to tell me that how excited they were to see me race. It feels good that I can have a positive, uplifting effect on other people in that way.
How has obviously road cycling helped you in your everyday life?
It's really helped me a lot. There's so much that's beneficial about training for me. It involves like mental concentration, physical effort over time, the consistency that I was talking about before, having to have a practice that you do day after day after day, and kind of orienting the rest of your life around that, whether it's, eating balanced meals regularly, getting enough rest, hydration, making sure your equipment is up to speed and all taken care of. These are all things that kind of lend focus to your life and have, make there be goals that you have to work hard to achieve. And as well as the fact that I get to be paid for something that I love to do.
How has it helped, obviously, giving back to those young athletes that are looking to get into road cycling and become Paralympians?
Well, honestly, I haven't had much interaction with young disabled would-be paracyclists or hand cyclists. The opportunity just hasn't really arisen. All I can hope is that, those who are interested in the sport are paying attention, and that, somehow, whether I'm aware of it or not, I'm able to kind of be an example of what's possible to young people who want to climb the ranks of hand cycling.
What are some of your favorite memories and moments while competing in hand cycling?
I would say, well, part of what I enjoy is the camaraderie that I have with the other hand cyclists on the U.S. National Paracycling team. I enjoy going to training camp and races with them and just riding with them, sharing stories, working hard, sweating, laughing, being happy when we've done well, being sad when we haven't. All the ins and outs and ups and downs of being part of a team is something that can be very, very rewarding. And also being at international events and getting to know some of my competitors, some of the other really fast, strong, smart hand cyclists that I have to try and beat. These are incredible women that I really look up to, and it's an honor to be able to race with them.
Have you been able to balance life outside of hand cycling with obviously being a Paralympian?
Yeah, it is definitely a balance that I have to try and find every day. I am a single mom, and for most of the years that I've been doing this, that's been really a big challenge to take on top of the amount of work that I do as an athlete. My daughter's now in college, actually, just started this year. So that kind of frees me up a bit more to be focusing on my training. But it's definitely a challenge to do it all. And all I can say is I just take it one day at a time and try and stay organized and have my priorities straight, which, I don't always do very well, but it's something that I aim for.
Of course, for you, how is that like, obviously, having your daughter see you and compete at the biggest stage of them all?
Oh, it's been wonderful. She's one of my biggest supporters, and it feels good to be able to provide her an example of what hard work over time can achieve.
What advice would you give those people that are looking to get in adaptive sports?
I would say go for it. You've got nothing to lose. It's a great way to be active, to meet other people who can be excellent resources for you and you for them. It's a great way to just connect socially with other people with disabilities who are active. Figure out what it is you want to do, what sport it is that you're drawn to, find the resources, people who can help you get started, and make it a part of your life. It really adds value.
What advice would you give those future Paralympians and even current Paralympians looking to compete?
I would say probably more or less the same advice that I would give myself, which is, work hard, believe in the possibility of your success. Know that your diligent efforts over time yield results. They absolutely do. Know that there are going to be challenges and obstacles along the way. And if you just find your way through those one at a time and keep on keeping on, that the results will come. And when they do, it's just a very empowering sense of accomplishment. And there'll be many wonderful other benefits, hidden benefits along the way too.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. And I believe on Facebook it's Alicia Dana, Alicia Dana 8 on Instagram. And then on Facebook, I'm Alicia Brelsford Dana. Brelsford is my maiden name. Brelsford.
Thank you again, Alicia Dana, for your interview, and best of luck in your future in the sport of road cycling.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. You can find Community Heroes on Facebook at Community Heroes, Instagram at Community Heroes_NC, Twitter at com_heroes, and you can find us on YouTube at Officially Community Heroes. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Alicia Dana, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
Take care.
You are watching Community Heroes. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Community Heroes on social media and on YouTube.